The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of John F. Kennedy Airport's Terminal 1, casting long shadows across the polished tile floor. Overhead, the crackle of flight announcements competed with the murmur of hurrying passengers and the soft clang of rolling suitcases. In the bustling first-class lounge, a hush of anticipation lingered beneath the din. Executives, celebrities, and dignitaries in crisp suits and designer coats settled into plush seats, sipping espresso or leafing through financial reports on their tablets. Meredith Vargas, though dressed in a simple cashmere coat and comfortable slacks, did not look the part of an everyday traveler. At 68, her silver hair framed a face both dignified and weathered by decades of determination. Her posture was graceful, every movement deliberate. She tapped her polished ivory cane twice against the floor as if marking time, each soft echo drawing curious glances from nearby passengers. Though she appeared an unassuming senior woman, Meredith carried herself with an unmistakable air of calm authority. Unbeknownst to everyone around her, this morning would be far more than a routine boarding. Underneath the poise lived a formidable force. Meredith Vargas was not merely another traveler. She was the founder and chairwoman of Aero Global Airlines, the very airline whose first-class lounge she occupied. Across the room, Rachel Turner cocked her head as she scanned boarding passes with the efficient briskness of someone who prided herself on flawless service. Tall and impeccably uniformed, she exuded a cool confidence. To her, first-class passengers were accustomed to deference. She measured them with a practiced eye, parsing their appearances and accessories for any hint of inauthenticity. When her gaze landed on Meredith, a subtle frown creased Rachel's brow. The cashmere coat and designer brooch indicated wealth, yet something about the gentle hesitancy in Meredith's step suggested a woman more comfortable in quiet reflection than corporate battles. Rachel's mind ticked off silent questions. Was this truly a first-class patron, or had someone slipped past security? Without pausing to investigate, she stepped forward. Meredith approached the boarding gate with a measured grace. She extended her hand and presented her boarding pass to Rachel, who barely glanced before snapping back, "Ma'am, this line is for first class only." Meredith met Rachel's eyes, pale blue and unwavering. "I believe this is my line," she replied softly, her voice steady and clear. Rachel's lips curled in thin disbelief. She leaned in, her tone laced with contempt. "You must have the wrong gate. First class isn't for people like you." A hush fell across the lounge. Nearby passengers looked up from their devices, eyebrows raised in shared curiosity. Then, in a single, jarring motion, Rachel's hand shot out. The sharp slap landed squarely across Meredith's cheek, echoing like a gunshot through the silent hall. The boarding pass flew from Meredith's hand and fluttered to the ground. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Meredith's cane clattered against the tile as she instinctively raised her hand to her stunned cheek. Her eyes widened, not in pain, but in cold disbelief. The rich burgundy mark bloomed across her skin. For a heartbeat, Meredith stood motionless. Then, with the gentlest exhale, she bowed her head, retrieved her boarding pass, and lifted it with the same quiet authority she had always commanded. She straightened, her gaze fixed on Rachel, and the room seemed to lean in. Rachel's face paled. She opened her mouth, but no words came, only the harsh wheeze of embarrassment. Around them, the lounge remained frozen, passengers caught between outrage and disbelief. In the polished mirror behind the check-in desk, Rachel's own reflection stared back, wide-eyed and shaking. Meredith lifted her voice, so soft it carried a chilling calm. "You've just made the gravest mistake of your career." A tremor passed through the assembly. Behind Rachel, a young businessman who had offered his seat earlier stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. A woman nearby covered her mouth with both hands, eyes brimming with sympathy and horror. The airport announcements continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding below. Meredith didn't raise her voice again. She folded her boarding pass neatly and slipped it into her coat pocket. Every passenger felt the weight of her stare, a piercing reminder that instinct, bias, and haste can lead to ruinous errors. As Meredith turned toward the jet bridge, she tapped her cane once more, the single echo of final punctuation. The crowd parted silently, granting passage to a woman they now understood was far more than she seemed. Behind her, Rachel Turner remained rooted, pale, and trembling. Around her, the lounge erupted into whispered conjecture, but Meredith's measured footsteps faded into the corridor, leaving behind an electric tension that would ripple through every level of Aero Global Airlines, from the ground staff to the boardroom. And in that moment, every person in that lounge realized this was no ordinary boarding. This was the beginning of a reckoning. The terminal lights hummed softly as morning traffic swelled. Business travelers in tailored suits glided past gleaming check-in kiosks and glossy storefronts, their footsteps a rhythmic pulse through John F. Kennedy Airport's Terminal 1. Beyond the sliding glass doors, the world moved in a predictable blur of flight schedules, rolling luggage, and the low drone of jet engines taxiing to gates. But within the velvet-roped enclave of Aero Global's first-class lounge, an altogether different energy thrummed, a hush of privilege and expectation. Here, the world's most influential figures paused between destinations. A hedge fund manager skimmed email on a sleek tablet. A Hollywood director tucked her feet into plush leather ottomans. An international diplomat adjusted cufflinks as a steward offered freshly baked croissants and single-origin coffee. At the center of it all sat Elena Vargas, completely at ease yet palpable in her presence. Elena occupied a secluded corner by a panoramic window where the runway stretched toward the horizon. The early sunlight caught the subtle shimmer of her emerald scarf and danced off the gold frames of her reading glasses. She cradled a leather portfolio embossed with the Aero Global crest. On the surface, she appeared to be a serene senior traveler enjoying a pre-flight ritual. In reality, Elena was the invisible hand guiding every decision aboard this airline. Born in 1956, Elena's journey began far from corporate boardrooms. She joined the aviation industry as a fresh-faced flight attendant in the late 70s, when few women dared to step into the skies. The memory of her first uniform, crisp navy blue with brass buttons, still lingered in her mind. She recalled the thrill of her first international flight, the nervous excitement as she addressed passengers in her soft Mexican-American accent, and the steely determination that carried her through skepticism and bias. Over decades, she climbed the ranks, earning respect through calm competence, sharp instincts, and an unwavering commitment to safety and service. By 1998, Elena had realized her ultimate ambition: to launch her own airline. With a modest loan and a handful of leased aircraft, she founded Aero Global, determined to redefine travel through a philosophy of quiet excellence. Under her stewardship, the airline grew steadily, acquiring 180 planes, establishing routes to 80 countries, and generating $4.1 billion in annual revenue. Yet Elena remained grounded in the fundamentals she learned in those early days. True luxury meant anticipation of needs, genuine respect for every passenger, and leadership by example. Across from Elena sat a barista-style station where attendants insisted on calling guests by name. One of Elena's protégés, Leah Bennett, moved deftly between tables, smiling gently as she refilled flutes of sparkling water. Leah glanced toward Elena, her face reflecting a blend of reverence and affection, an unspoken bond between mentor and former mentee. Elena had chosen Leah from a pool of promising trainees years ago, recognizing in her the same calm resolve that had defined her own career's start. Every now and then, Elena's gaze drifted toward the sleek Aero Global emblem etched into the lounge walls. It was more than a logo. It symbolized decades of perseverance, countless early mornings, and tough decisions that shaped the airline's trajectory. On crisp autumn evenings, she wandered these very corridors after late-night board meetings, imagining how to improve cabin comfort or streamline ground operations. She often told her leadership team that greatness was found not in fanfare, but in the small details. the precise placement of a napkin, the tone of a welcome greeting, or the gentle firmness of a pre-takeoff safety demonstration. Despite her legacy, Elena never sought the spotlight. She maintained a discreet home in Greenwich, Connecticut, where manicured hedges and hidden driveways shielded her from press attention. Only close friends and a handful of executives knew her weekend refuge. A historic estate overlooking Long Island Sound, complete with a private dock and a workshop where she maintained vintage aviation instruments. Business magazines termed her the silent force of the skies, but to Elena, that appellation was almost too loud for her liking. On this particular morning, Elena observed subtle shifts in lounge activity. She noted the tension lingering around the boarding gate where her path would soon cross with Rachel Turner's. A meeting she did not orchestrate, but had anticipated in her usual, understated way. She sipped her Earl Grey tea, the bergamot aroma weaving into her thoughts, as she mentally reviewed her itinerary. A mid-flight video conference with Munich operations, followed by a customer experience review with ground staff in Frankfurt, and finally, a private gala celebrating Aero Global's 25th anniversary. As she folded her portfolio and rose slowly, Elena's mind centered on the bigger picture. The passenger list spelled out more than names and seat assignments. It detailed the individuals who shaped industries, negotiated treaties, and funded philanthropic ventures. She had long maintained the belief that an airline's true success lay in the lives it touched, from the billionaire board members to the maintenance crew who polished wing flaps at sunrise. With a final, deliberate tap of her ivory cane, once a tool for stability, now a symbol of her hard-earned authority, Elena moved toward the boarding gate. As she stepped into the flow of passengers, a ripple of recognition passed through those nearest to her. Cameras flashed discreetly. Whispers floated, "Isn't that?" and then trailed off in awe. But Elena's stride never faltered. No fanfare, no need for introduction. In her world, power spoke softly, carried on the weight of kindness, competence, and unshakable dignity. And as she approached Rachel Turner to present her boarding pass, unaware that the next moment would shatter both illusion and etiquette, Elena Vargas embodied the quiet power that had built an airline from the ground up. In that delicate pause before her life's second reckoning, the first-class lounge held its breath, unaware that its founder was about to rewrite all the rules of respect and authority. Elena Vargas stood before the boarding gate, her polished ivory cane poised like a conductor's baton ready to cue the next movement. She extended her hand and offered her boarding pass to Rachel Turner with serene composure. Yet the moment their eyes met, the tension that had simmered beneath the surface ignited. Rachel, her dark hair pulled back into a severe bun, glanced at the pass and frowned. The holographic sheen flickered under the overhead lights. Something about Elena's modest yet refined attire seemed at odds with the exclusivity Rachel tirelessly enforced. "This line is exclusively for first-class passengers," Rachel said, her tone measured but edged with suspicion. Elena sank her voice even lower, as though handing down a verdict on a court of biases. "I'm fully aware," she replied quietly. Rachel's eyes narrowed. She reached out to swipe the boarding pass through the scanner, but hesitated mid-motion. Her heart raced. She had no reason to doubt the ticket itself, yet she could not shake her instinctive judgment. She looked up at Elena's tranquil face and saw, in a flash, something she couldn't place. A familiarity, a memory at the periphery of her mind. Before she could rationalize it, Rachel spoke out loud. "You don't look like a first-class passenger," she said. The words dripped with disdain. "People like you don't belong here." The lounge's ambient calm fractured, and all eyes turned toward them. Elena's expression did not waver. She raised her chin ever so slightly, the subtlest of movements that carried unspoken authority. It was then that Rachel's impulse betrayed her again. She lashed out, her hand swinging in a controlled but unmistakable arc. The sharp crack of leather across fabric preceded the rush of murmurs. Elena's boarding pass flew from her hand, fluttering to the floor like a wounded bird. The world slowed. Rachel saw the moment in agonizing freeze frame, the boarding pass skimming the tile. Elena's cane clattering, and the flicker of something deeply personal in Elena's pale blue eyes. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, and her heart, pounding like a runaway engine, betrayed the sudden, profound realization that this act was far more than a disciplinary misstep. She backed away, hand pressed to the spot on her palm where the cane had brushed. Flaming embarrassment crept up her neck and warmed her cheeks. Around her, a stunned hush fell over the lounge. No one moved. No one spoke. Elena bent gracefully at the waist, retrieving her boarding pass. She tucked it into the leather folder at her side without a word. Then, lifting her head, she fixed Rachel with a gaze so calm it made onlookers' skin prickle. "You've just made the gravest mistake of your career," Elena said, her voice a velvet hammer. It carried across the space with deliberate clarity. "But it is not this slap that will define you." Every passenger felt the weight of those words. A senior diplomat sitting nearby shifted in her seat, whispering to her aide. A tech mogul snapped a photo with his phone, capturing Rachel's shame. The steward at the next barista station paused mid-pour, eyes wide. Rachel's mind raced back to a memory she'd buried. 10 years ago, a younger Elena Vargas had stood before a classroom of flight attendant trainees. She had pointed directly at Rachel, her young star pupil, and said, "You have potential beyond these aisles. I'm sponsoring your entire program." Rachel had felt pride and gratitude. Now she felt horror and guilt. In that instant, Rachel recognized the woman she had so brutishly struck. Rachel's breathing became shallow. Her carefully maintained composure crumbled. She had just slapped the woman who had given her the break of a lifetime. A mentor. A benefactor. The hush broke with a crackle of whispered shock. Rachel sank to one knee, voice trembling. "Ms. Vargas, She tried to form an apology, but the words tangled on her tongue. Tears welled in her eyes, and every fiber of her uniform felt like it was choking her. Elena watched quietly, her expression inscrutable. Around them, the first-class lounge seemed to pulse with collective judgment. Some faces hardening with disapproval, others softening with sympathy for Rachel's dawning remorse. Finally, Elena raised her hand in a quiet gesture that stilled the murmurs. "I will hear your apology," she said, "and I will judge not only what you've done, but who you choose to become after this moment." With that, Elena turned and moved toward the jet bridge, her cane tapping once in measured cadence. The boarding area parted instinctively, creating a path that underscored her unspoken authority. As the doors slid open, Rachel remained kneeling on the polished tile, her uniform pristine yet stained by her own actions. She watched Elena walk away, every step a reminder of what she had lost. Not her job, but her integrity and the trust of the woman who once believed in her. In the stunned silence that followed, one thought echoed through Rachel's mind. She had sparked a conflict far deeper than career repercussions. She had betrayed a bond that could never be fully repaired, unless she found the courage to rebuild it from the ashes of her mistake. The morning sun glinted off the stainless steel accents of the boarding gate as Rachel Turner stood, a sentinel in starched uniform, guarding the passage to first class. Around her, passengers shifted impatiently, their designer luggage and sleek briefcases testament to their status. In that moment, Rachel felt the familiar rush of power, the heady assurance that she alone measured who merited this exclusive realm. Elena Vargas stood on the other side of the velvet rope, every inch the picture of composure. Her emerald scarf lay perfectly draped, her silver hair contained in soft waves, and her pale blue eyes held an unspoken command. Rachel had expected hesitation, perhaps gratitude in Elena's stance, but instead saw a quiet dignity that unsettled her. "Ma'am," Rachel said, her voice crisp as she eyed the boarding pass. She tapped at the holochip scanner with clinical precision. "First class isn't for people like you." A murmur rippled through the lounge. Glasses paused midair. A financial executive lowered his newspaper. Rachel felt a flicker of satisfaction. She had cut through Elena's calm exterior, forced that veneer to crack. Elena's expression remained neutral. She tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and pressed her lips together, as if considering whether to smile or frown. Then, in a voice soft as dusk, she replied, "And what category do you believe I belong to?" Rachel's throat tightened. The question hung in the air like a challenge. She swallowed, her mania for control tightening its grip. She glanced down at Elena's modest but tasteful attire, heritage threads from a boutique in Greenwich. There were no designer logos screaming for attention, just an understated elegance that was difficult to categorize. A tap on the scanner broke the tension. Rachel straightened. She met Elena's gaze and said, "People who can't afford to grace this cabin with their presence." Shock flashed across those assembled. It wasn't purely Elena Vargas's history that had drawn them here. It was the sheer audacity of Rachel's scorn. Elena's posture never wavered, but her fingers curled around her ivory cane's handle, knuckles whitening. In that fraction of a second, Rachel recognized the shift. The woman before her was not only unoffended, she was quietly furious. The soft exhale from Elena carried a weight that pressed against Rachel's chest. "I'm curious," Elena said, her tone almost conversational. "When was the last time you verified a passenger's background rather than their clothing?" The challenge struck Rachel like a physical blow. She saw her own reflection in the glossy panel behind Elena, eyes wide, jaw clenched. She tried to weave an answer, but her rehearsed script of policy and gate assignments faltered. Elena's gaze drifted to the terminal's digital display. Final boarding call for a handful of passengers, flight engineers checking systems in the distance, and the slow dance of ground crew preparing the jet for departure. She imagined the seamless choreography required to run an airline, every role dependent on trust, respect, and shared mission. Rachel's words had undermined that trust. Rachel's voice shook as she forced out, I'm following protocol, Ms. Vargas." Elena let out a soft but audible sigh. "Protocol," she echoed. "Does it stipulate that I'm judged before I even present my credentials?" She extended the cane. "Check, please." Rachel's fingers trembled. She reached out, scanning the boarding pass again, slower this time. The scanner chirped acceptance, green light glowing. But Rachel could not look away from Elena's calm yet piercing gaze. Without a word, Elena moved forward, letting Rachel step back. She reached for the handrail to ascend the walkway to the jet bridge, her cane tapping twice. Tap, tap. Each note reverberating through the hush. Passengers parted like a tide, and every eye followed her. Rachel heard the muted clang of her own heartbeat. The mounting tension. It was more than fear, more than embarrassment. It was the raw sting of self-doubt and shame. That afternoon, Rachel would replay every moment in her mind. Her initial judgment, the contempt she had uttered, the flash of recognition when Elena had challenged her authority. In the quiet solitude of the crew lounge, she would realize that her entire worldview had been tethered to superficial assessments, designer labels, confident gait, polished shoes. As the jet bridge doors closed behind Elena, sealing her path to the cabin, Rachel remained rooted at the gate, the empty scanner clicking in protest. The flavor of regret was metallic on her tongue. Above her, the terminal lights hummed on, their steady drone a reminder that operations moved on, regardless of personal failures. Yet in the undercurrent of that drone, a new awareness was born in Rachel Turner. She had crossed a line, one defined not by rules, but by humanity. And while Elena Vargas soared onward, Rachel stood at the fulcrum of her own transformation, teetering between denial and contrition. The rising tension of that moment would shape every decision in the hours to follow, carrying the promise of either redemption or ruin. In the silence that followed, one truth remained. Nothing at Aero Global would ever be the same again. A hush settled over the first-class lounge the instant Elena Vargas's words faded. The phrase itself was deceptively simple, yet each syllable crackled with the force of an unspoken verdict. Rachel Turner's breath caught, mid-exhale, as if the very air had transformed into ice. "You've just made the gravest mistake of your career," Elena had said, voice soft but razor-sharp. She sank back onto the leather ottoman, ivory cane resting gently against her lap. The single sentence hung heavy in the space between them, insulating Elena from any immediate retaliation. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The barista froze, latte in hand. An executive halfway through a toast with his green juice pivoted in stunned silence. Even the airport announcements seemed to pause, their crackling static swallowed by the weight of Elena's calm authority. Rachel's knuckles pale around her name tag. She swallowed hard. Her mind raced, grasping for the safety net of policy manuals and standard operating procedures. But Elena had bypassed them all with a statement that felt like a courtroom ruling. Seconds stretched out, each one amplifying the collective gasp of the assembled passengers. They watched Rachel Turner stand trembling at the threshold of her own making. The woman who decided who belonged, now confronted by someone she had gravely underestimated. Rachel's voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. I'm so sorry, Ms. Vargas." The words tumbled out, fractured and raw. She took a trembling step forward, head bowed. I didn't mean..." Elena held up a slender hand, gently halting the apology. Her pale blue eyes locked onto Rachel's with a gaze that was kind yet unrelenting. "Your apology is noted," she said quietly. "But I want to know, when you look at me now, do you see the passenger you chose to judge, or the person who believed in you once?" A beat. The lounge seemed to lean in, as if eager to catch the next revelation. Rachel's jaw quivered. She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced out a single word. "Both." Elena allowed a shadow of a smile to brush her lips. It was not warmth, but something closer to pity tempered by hope. "Then you understand the calculus of justice," she said, rising smoothly. "Mistakes aren't measured in slaps. They're measured in choices made afterward." With that, Elena tapped her cane once against the polished tile. Tap. A punctuation. She turned and began to walk toward the jet bridge, each step deliberate, each echo a reminder of her legacy of quiet strength. Passengers moved aside instinctively, parting like a gentle current. Rachel remained rooted, torn between the impulse to follow Elena's retreat and the need to atone in situ. Her gaze traced the rhythmic tap of that ivory shaft, a metronome counting out her own failures. The moment lingered, pregnant with unspoken questions. Would Rachel gather the courage to face her own biases head-on, or would she shrink back into the safety of uniforms and rulebooks? The answer hovered in the charged silence. Behind Elena, the lounge began to stir. A few guests offered approving nods. Others murmured in hushed tones about the extraordinary encounter. Yet Rachel heard only the echo of Elena's words in her mind. Choices made afterward. She straightened her posture, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward, just as Richard Montgomery emerged from a side corridor. His carefully pressed suit and stony expression cut an imposing figure. In his hand, a crisp Aero Global badge glimmered in the overhead lights. Rachel's heart skipped. The man known throughout the airline's ranks as Elena's right hand and the guardian of its standards paused beside her. Without a word, he placed a firm hand on her arm and nodded toward the jet bridge. The invitation was clear. Second-guessing protocol was no longer permitted. Rachel swallowed, her throat tight. "Yes, sir," she whispered. Richard's eyes never left the jet bridge through which Elena had vanished moments before. Then he turned to Rachel, voice low but emphatic. "Walk with me." Together, they followed Elena's path, each footstep echoing with the weight of consequence. The terminal's bright bustle faded as they moved deeper into operational corridors, leaving behind the opulence of first class for the steely corridors of justice. Rachel Turner knew that from this point on, every decision would be measured against that quiet reckoning, each choice a chance at redemption, or another misstep toward professional oblivion. And as the sliding doors closed behind them, sealing the moment, the first-class lounge held its breath once more. awaiting the next act in Aero Global's unfolding drama. Rachel Turner's footsteps echoed hollowly against the linoleum of the back corridor as she followed Richard Montgomery's steady stride. The bright hum of the first-class lounge faded behind them, replaced by the muted bustle of service elevators and the soft thrum of distant machinery. Every fiber of Rachel's uniform felt like a shackle, reminding her that she was literally and figuratively trapped by her own mistake. Richard led her to a broad door emblazoned with the Aero Global crest. He produced a keycard and swiped it with a brisk gesture. The door swung open into the airline's administrative annex, a quiet world of polished marble floors, glass-walled offices, and hushed conversations behind closed doors. "Sit," Richard said, gesturing toward a pair of leather chairs before a wide mahogany desk. Behind it sat Stephen Caldwell, the airline's executive vice president, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was matched only by his unflappable calm. His steely gaze was fixed on a ledger of passenger incident reports, and next to it, a fresh file labeled Turner, R. Rachel swallowed and seated herself, throat parched. Her uniform felt suddenly foreign. She was no longer the confident arbiter of first-class decorum, but an accused wrongdoer awaiting judgment. Stephen leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Ms. Turner," he began, voice and even monotone that brooked no interruption. "You are one of our most senior cabin attendants. Your record is exemplary, until today." He tapped the file. "This incident has created a significant public relations issue. We have statements from passengers, video footage from the lounge, and internal reports. The big question is, does Aero Global tolerate such behavior from someone in your position?" Rachel's pulse thundered as she realized the stakes. A single nod from Stephen, and her decades-long career could end in an instant. Richard cleared his throat. "Aero Global lives and dies by its reputation for impeccable service. That reputation was jeopardized when you assaulted our founder. Ms. Vargas is more than a passenger. She is the architect of every policy, every charter, every flight path this airline has flown. She deserves our utmost respect." Rachel's mind flashed back to the first time she'd met Elena Vargas, an eager trainee with bright eyes and trembling hands. She remembered Elena's quiet encouragement. The scholarship letter slipped into her locker. The words, "I believe in your potential." The memories cut through her shame like a blade. Stephen continued, "Your behavior broke more than protocol. It broke the trust between leadership and your peers. We cannot simply pretend this didn't happen." He slid the file toward her. "We have two options, immediate termination or conditional retention. Conditional retention involves a 6-month probation, completion of advanced customer empathy training, monthly performance reviews, and mandatory participation in our leadership mentorship program under Ms. Vargas's oversight." Rachel's breath caught. To be forced into Elena Vargas's presence again, under her supervision, it was unthinkable. Yet to face termination would mean professional oblivion. Richard spoke again, softer but no less commanding. "Ms. Turner, the mentorship program is your chance to rebuild trust and to learn from the person you wronged most deeply. Do you understand?" Rachel pressed her lips together, grappling with the enormity of the choice. She glanced at the window behind Stephen's desk, where sunlight illuminated the Aero Global emblem etched into the glass, a reminder of the airline's reach and reputation. "I understand," she said, voice trembling but determined. "I choose conditional retention. I want to earn back that trust." Stephen nodded once. "Very well. You start training next week. Ms. Vargas will receive a copy of your progress reports. Fail to meet expectations, and your contract ends immediately." Rachel swallowed, nodding. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, Mr. Montgomery." Richard stood. "You may go." He gave a curt nod toward the door. Rachel rose, her uniform's crisp lines feeling heavier than before. Every step out of the office felt like shedding a layer of denial. On the way back to the jet bridge, Rachel's footsteps were no longer driven by authority. They were guided by accountability. For the first time, her role was not to judge passengers, but to serve in humility. As the door closed behind her, Rachel Turner exhaled, bracing for the mentorship that would test every assumption she'd ever held. And somewhere, out on the tarmac, an Aero Global jet awaited her renewed commitment to dignity, respect, and quiet excellence. The first-class cabin hummed with exhausted energy as Flight AZ-812 prepared for takeoff. Soft, bluish lighting illuminated the quilted seatbacks and pristine white linens draped over gleaming seat trays. Rachel Turner stood at the front, clipboard in hand, heart pounding so fiercely she could feel it echo beneath her uniform. This was not a routine flight. It was her first test under Elena Vargas's mentorship, and every passenger in this cabin held her fate in their silent scrutiny. She inhaled, steadying her breathing. From the cockpit, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Cabin crew, seatbelts please. We're ready for departure." Rachel acknowledged with a crisp, professional nod, then turned to address the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice firm, but carrying an undercurrent of conviction. She watched the reactions ripple across polished faces. Some expected polite efficiency, others braced for another display of former arrogance. Tonight, she would show them something different. "I'd like to take a moment to personally apologize to Ms. Elena Vargas and to all of you here in first class," Rachel continued, eyes drifting to the row where Elena sat, cane resting by her seat. The cabin fell deathly silent. Passengers exchanged glances, and flight attendants paused mid-task. "My actions prior to boarding were inexcusable. I allowed prejudice and poor judgment to override my duty of care." She felt the weight of every gaze. A tech investor in seat 1A tapped his watch, a discreet signal of corporate impatience. A renowned actress in 2C folded her arms, intrigue softening her Hollywood-honed skepticism. Rachel inhaled, channeling every lesson from the empathy training she'd endured. "I don't expect swift forgiveness," she said, voice wavering. "But I promise that under Ms. Vargas's mentorship, I will learn from this and work every day to earn back your trust." Elena's pale blue eyes studied her, unreadable. Rachel's cheeks burned as sweat beaded along her hairline. Yet when she dared to meet Elena's gaze, she found not vindictiveness, but a glimmer of acknowledgement, a subtle nod that encouraged her onward. "Thank you," Elena said softly, her voice carrying through the cabin. That took courage. Time seemed to shift. What had begun as a display of public humiliation transformed into a genuine moment of reconciliation. Passengers stiffened, then slowly relaxed. The actress in 2C gave a small smile. The tech investor leaned back, contemplative. In the galley, a stewardess dabbed at her eyes, moved by the authenticity of the scene. Rachel's next steps were precise. She moved through the cabin with renewed purpose, checking seatbelts with a courteous remark, offering extra pillows with a heartfelt apology, and ensuring every request was met with genuine attentiveness. Each interaction was an opportunity to demonstrate her commitment to service beyond protocol. When the engines rumbled to life and the aircraft accelerated down the runway, Rachel felt a shift within herself. The anticipation of takeoff mingled with the fresh resolve to uphold the principles Elena had instilled. In the soft glow of cabin lights, she watched Elena review flight details on a slim tablet, and for the first time, Rachel truly felt part of something larger than herself. Mid-flight, a small incident tested her resolve. A passenger's cabin baggage had slipped, scattering a stack of magazines. Rachel rushed over without being asked, offering an unhesitating apology as she gathered the scattered reading material with careful hands. The passenger, a senior banker, looked up, surprised. "Thank you," he said, voice genuine. Most would have just kept walking. Rachel smiled, a gesture of quiet assurance. "No one needs to feel overlooked here," she replied. The banker nodded thoughtfully, returning to his work. Later, as Rachel refilled water glasses, Elena appeared at her side. "You handled that well," Elena remarked. "Empathy is a service too." Rachel's heart swelled. "Thank you," she whispered. As the flight crew prepared for landing, Rachel took a final look around the cabin. The tension that had once hung like a storm cloud had dissipated, replaced by a calm professionalism. Passengers settled into seats with relaxed posture. The cabin buzzed softly with settled contentment. In those final minutes before descent, Rachel reflected on her journey. Public atonement was more than a scripted apology. It was the beginning of true redemption. Under Elena Vargas's mentorship, she had taken the first real steps toward reclaiming her integrity. And as AZ-812 touched down smoothly on the runway, Rachel Turner stood taller, uniform crisp, eyes shining with a new understanding. That true service meant leading with humility and respect, and that sometimes the greatest authority was found in the vulnerability of atonement. The cabin lights dimmed to a tranquil glow as flight AZ-812 leveled off at 35,000 feet. Outside, the sky was a deep cerulean, and the land below was obscured by wispy clouds drifting like silent ships across an ocean. Inside the first-class cabin, a delicate hush settled, the kind that follows a moment of reckoning and sets the stage for quiet transformation. Rachel Turner stood at the threshold of row 3, where Elena Vargas was seated. A polished wooden tray lay on Elena's fold-out table, empty but for a single folded linen napkin. For Rachel, this wasn't just an assignment, it was penance. Under the terms of her probation, she would personally attend to every need of the woman she'd wronged. She inhaled, steadying herself. The weight of her previous misjudgment still lingered like a shadow in her mind, but tonight she would let service be her redemption. "Ms. Vargas, may I offer you some water?" Elena looked up from her novel, an old leather-bound copy of The Little Prince, and offered a gentle smile. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it carried the warmth of forgiveness. "Water would be lovely, Rachel," she replied, pronouncing the name as if to remind Rachel of their new dynamic. Rachel poured the water with deliberate care, ensuring no droplet missed the crystal glass. She placed it before Elena, tucking the vessel so it rested just at arm's length. "Anything else I can do?" she asked, voice calm and professional. Elena considered the question. She reached into the side pocket of her seat and withdrew a small leather-bound notebook. "Could you bring me a pen?" she said softly. Rachel nodded, retrieving a slim, gold-nibbed pen from her apron pocket. She handed it to Elena with both hands, bowing her head slightly in respect. As Elena signed the notebook's margin, she gave Rachel a nod of appreciation. The rest of the cabin watched this exchange with rapt attention. Business magnates put aside their portfolios, and socialites paused mid-conversation. Rachel sensed their gaze, but focused only on her task. Minutes later, a young couple in seat 4B requested extra blankets. Rachel knelt down to demonstrate how to unfold the plush throw, her tone warm yet humble. "There you go, Mr. and Mrs. Singh. Let me know if you need anything else." As she turned back toward Elena's row, she caught sight of her own reflection in the overhead bin's smooth surface. Tired eyes, a uniform that no longer felt like armor, and a posture that only now spoke of genuine service rather than command. At the halfway point of the flight, the in-flight entertainment screens dimmed for the cabin lights. Rachel moved from seat to seat, offering chocolates on a silver platter. At Elena's place, Rachel paused and presented a single dark truffle on a petite dish. Elena accepted it, her lips curving in a small, knowing smile. She took a delicate bite and nodded in approval. "Exquisite," she said. In that simple exchange, Rachel felt a spark of confidence rekindle. She realized that service was not a sign of weakness, but an expression of strength. The strength required to acknowledge mistake and the fortitude to make amends. Later, as the cabin grew quiet with drifting slumber, Rachel checked on a businessman in 1A who'd spilled his red wine. Without a second thought, she provided fresh towels and gently guided him through the cleanup. The man, a known industry titan, looked up from his seat. "Thank you, Ms. Turner," he said with sincerity. "Good service is rare these days." Rachel offered a small, genuine smile. "It's my pleasure." Back at Elena's seat, Rachel found the chair empty, But not for long. Elena had stepped away for a moment, returning with a steaming cup of chamomile tea she'd prepared herself in the galley. She set the cup before Rachel with a gentle nod. "For you," she said. "You deserve it." Rachel's eyes widened. She reached out, tentatively accepting the cup. The warmth seeped into her palms, a tangible reminder that leadership could be compassionate. She took a small sip, the mild fragrance of chamomile soothing her unsettled nerves. "Thank you, Miss Vargas," Rachel whispered. Elena's gaze held steady. "I said thank you when you apologized," she replied. "Now I'm giving thanks for your hard work." The cabin lights brightened as the captain announced preparations for descent. Rachel moved to secure the galley, her movements confident yet controlled. She checked emergency equipment, straightened service trolleys, and verified that each passenger's seatbelt sign was illuminated. As she made her way back to the front, she caught the eye of Leah Bennett in the aisle. Leah offered a small, respectful nod and thumbs-up gesture, a silent show of solidarity. Rachel exhaled. The path to redemption was far from over, but this night's service had been a meaningful stride. Under the soft hum of the descent, she realized that her true transformation lay not in public apologies, but in these quiet moments of genuine care. And as the runway lights appeared like beacons below, Rachel Turner stood at her post, not as a judge of passengers, but as their devoted steward, a testament to the power of humility and the enduring strength of service. The lights in the cabin dimmed further, signaling that flight AZ-812 had entered the cruising phase. The steady hum of engines created a soft backdrop to the near-silent environment. Many passengers had dozed off, lulled by the gentle rhythm of the aircraft and the comfort they had just received. Yet in the galley, Rachel Turner found herself awake and wide-eyed, reflecting on the transformation that had overtaken her. She wiped down the service trolleys and checked the stock quietly, her mind a whirl of insights. Gone were the days when she judged passengers at a glance. Now, every person in this cabin represented an opportunity for genuine connection, a chance to repair trust. Stepping back into the aisle, Rachel paused at seat 2D, where a middle-aged woman slept soundly, head tilted against the window. Nearby, a young entrepreneur adjusted her presentation slides on a tablet, oblivious to the airline drama that had occurred earlier. Across the aisle, a retired judge read a travel memoir, his eyes flickering up occasionally to observe Rachel's measured approach. Rachel remembered Elena's words from the cockpit. "Empathy is a service, too." Those words echoed in her mind as she retrieved a water bottle from the trolley and approached the entrepreneur. "Ma'am, would you care for more water?" she asked softly. The entrepreneur looked up, surprised, then smiled warmly. "Thank you, I appreciate it." Rachel offered a small nod, her heart swelling at the genuine gratitude in that brief exchange. Passing row 1, Rachel caught sight of Sebastian Drake, the young businessman who'd witnessed the gate incident. He met Rachel's gaze and gave a small, understanding nod. Rachel realized he wasn't just acknowledging her apology, but recognizing the depth of her efforts to change. In the center of the cabin, Leah Bennett approached Rachel with a discreet whisper. "You're doing great," Leah said, her voice low but sincere. "Keep going." Rachel exhaled, grateful for the support. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself a private victory. She had turned shame into dedication. At the front of the cabin, she noticed Elena Vargas seated calmly, reviewing flight data on a sleek tablet. Rachel approached, offering a quiet greeting. "Everything seems smooth, Ms. Vargas. No issues to report." Elena looked up, her pale blue eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and expectation. "I've been watching, Rachel. Your service has been impeccable." Rachel's cheeks warmed. "Thank you. Your guidance made all the difference." Elena closed the tablet and leaned forward. "Tell me, what have you learned about leadership tonight?" Rachel paused, considering her answer. She thought of her initial arrogance, the gate incident, the public apology, and now these moments of heartfelt service. "I learned that leadership isn't about authority or enforcing rules," she began. "It's about understanding people, seeing beyond the surface and treating every passenger with respect and dignity. Elena nodded thoughtfully. That's correct, and it's only the beginning. Rachel felt a surge of commitment. She knew her probation would require evidence of sustained change, but in this moment, she realized how far she had come. Her journey had moved from impersonal directives to genuine human connection. As the flight continued, Rachel took a moment to walk the aisle, greeting each passenger with a warm smile and attentive eye. For each whispered request or polite gratitude, she felt the seeds of redemption taking root. Later, when the captain announced the descent sequence, Rachel returned to her station, ready to assist. The rise and fall of the cabin's gentle energy had become her rhythm. She guided passengers through seatbelt fastening, stowed baggage with care, and offered reassuring words to anxious travelers. When the plane touched down, the cabin lights brightened, and a round of polite applause broke out. Rachel offered a humble bow to the passengers, her heart light with the knowledge that this applause was not for a flawless flight, but for her heartfelt service. As the door opened, she led the way to the jet bridge, flanked by passengers eager to deplane. Each step she took was no longer a march of authority, but a procession of gratitude and respect. And as she reached the bottom of the walkway, Rachel Turner paused and glanced back at the cabin one last time. She had come full circle, from judgment to empathy, from command to service. In the quiet realization of her own transformation, she saw not just a flight attendant, but a leader reborn through humility and genuine care. The gentle click of the cockpit door sliding open was almost muted against the ambient hum of the cabin. Rachel Turner drew a steadying breath before stepping across the threshold, saluting Captain Jonathan Reynolds with a crisp nod. The dim glow of instrument panels cast a soft light across the pair of pilots, but it was the video monitor behind them that held Rachel's gaze. On the screen was Stephen Caldwell's unwavering expression, his presence as commanding as if he stood beside her. "Ms. Turner," Stephen's voice crackled over the intercom, calm yet insistent. "Explain to us why you denied Ms. Vargas her rightful boarding privileges." Rachel swallowed. The memory of the gate, Elena's hand trembling to pick up her cane, the slap echoing like a whip, flashed behind her eyes. She squared her shoulders. "Sir," she began, her voice steady, "I judged Ms. Vargas by appearances rather than verifying her credentials. I let bias override my duty." Stephen's steely gaze probed her. Captain Reynolds folded his arms, eyes narrowing. Rachel felt the weight of their scrutiny, the full force of airline authority bearing down. Yet she met their eyes without flinching. "It ended there, Ms. Turner," Stephen continued evenly. "But you did more than judge. You physically assaulted a passenger who happens to be the founder and chairwoman of Aero Global. This is not a minor policy infraction. It is a direct attack on the leadership of this company." Rachel's heart pounded. She clenched her hands into fists at her sides, fingernails digging into her palms. "Yes, sir," she replied, "and I take full responsibility." Captain Reynolds exchanged a glance with Stephen. Rachel noticed the tight set of his jaw. He was more than a pilot. He was an enforcer of protocol, a guardian of safety and respect in these skies. Stephen leaned forward, voice tapering into a quieter intensity. "Do you believe a single apology is enough, Miss Turner?" Rachel hesitated, remembering her public apology, the nod from Elena, the tentative support of her peers. "I believe apology is just a beginning, sir. True accountability." She paused, searching for the precise words. "True accountability is demonstrated through consistent action, through empathy, service, and willingness to be guided by those we wronged." Stephen's eyes flicked to the screen's corner, Elena's composed profile, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she listened. The tension in the cockpit was electric, a crossfire of expectations and judgments. "Ms. Turner," Captain Reynolds broke in, voice calm but firm. "Ground operations report that you've been performing under the mentorship program precisely as outlined. Your service in flight has received positive feedback. Yet this question remains. Do you understand why your initial actions were so damaging? Rachel exhaled slowly, nodding. I do, Captain. I let prejudice guide me, and I violated the trust passengers place in us. Ms. Vargas's mistake was mine. Stephen pressed a button, ending the call. The monitor flickered off, leaving the two pilots and Rachel in the cocoon of cockpit light. The door clicked shut, and for a heartbeat, the space was still. Captain Reynolds leaned forward, picking up a flight strip from the console. Tomorrow, he said quietly, you'll assist me with pre-flight briefings. Rachel's brow furrowed. Sir? He met her gaze. I want you to understand every dimension of our operation: crew coordination, safety protocols, emergency procedures. Consider it part of your redemption process. Rachel felt a swell of gratitude and apprehension. This was no cushy probation. It was immersive accountability. She nodded, voice earnest. Thank you, Captain. I won't let you down. Reynolds gave a curt nod. Dismissed. Rachel saluted and backed toward the door, stepping into the cabin's soft light once more. As she crossed the threshold, she felt the full weight of her journey, from judgment to apology, from forced humility to genuine service, and now to the rigorous discipline of understanding every facet of flight operations. Ahead of her lay further challenges: briefings to master, procedures to internalize, respect to rebuild. But in that moment, Rachel Turner understood she was not merely flying a plane. She was navigating the skies of her own redemption, and with every step, she honored the silent authority of Elena Vargas, who had shown her that true leadership demanded not only conviction, but the courage to confront one's deepest failings. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of Aero Global's executive conference room, illuminating the long, polished table and the attentive faces gathered around it. A hush settled over the group as Elena Vargas took her place at the head of the table, her cane resting beside her chair. To her right sat Stephen Caldwell, expression unreadable but eyes sharp. To her left, James Whitmore, operations director, studied a fresh set of reports. Behind them, two senior executives hovered, ready to record every word. Rachel Turner entered last, her uniform impeccably pressed, but her posture still rigid from nerves. This was her final evaluation meeting. 6 months of probation, mentorship under Elena, public atonement on Flight AZ-812, intensive cockpit training, and countless hours of empathy modules had led to this moment. She paused at the door, took a breath, and stepped into the room. Elena, Richard Montgomery greeted quietly, rising to offer her a polite nod. Thank you for convening this meeting. Elena returned the nod, then turned her attention to Rachel. Please, sit, she said, voice calm. Today, we decide what comes next, not just for Ms. Turner, but for Aero Global as a whole. Rachel took her seat, swallowing as she laid her hands flat on the table. She met Elena's pale blue gaze, steadying herself for whatever verdict would come. Stephen tapped a folder in front of him. We have reviewed Ms. Turner's performance. Flight reviews show a 20% uptick in passenger satisfaction scores, 0 complaints since the probation began, and positive feedback on teamwork from both cabin and cockpit crews. He paused, letting the data settle. Rachel, your improvement is undeniable. James leaned forward. However, we're not here merely to evaluate past performance. We must consider future impact. The incident with Ms. Vargas exposed a gap in our service culture, an opportunity to strengthen policies and training across the board. Elena folded her hands. Ms. Turner, you've learned firsthand how damaging unchecked bias can be. I believe you're uniquely positioned to help us reshape our customer experience. She paused, letting her words sink in. What do you propose? Rachel's heart pounded. This was the moment to transform her redemption into tangible change. She straightened. Thank you, Ms. Vargas. I propose a 3-pronged initiative focused on awareness, accountability, and action. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her displayed a slide titled Project Compass, Guiding Service Excellence. First, awareness. We implement mandatory immersive bias awareness workshops for all frontline staff, flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service teams. These sessions will include real-life scenarios, role-playing, and testimony from diverse passengers. They won't be optional. Stephen nodded slowly. And accountability? Second, accountability. We introduce a service charter that passengers can review before boarding. It lays out our commitment to dignity and respect, and it outlines clear consequences for breaches, including immediate removal from service, just as Ms. Vargas's incident was handled. Rachel's voice strengthened as she spoke. Every crew member will sign this charter annually, acknowledging their responsibility. James interjected, "How do we enforce it without creating a punitive atmosphere?" Rachel clicked to the next slide. Peer-led feedback circles. Accountability must be balanced with support. After each flight, crews will conduct peer feedback sessions, anonymously if they choose, to highlight both strengths and areas for improvement. Managers will review these reports, but the process emphasizes growth, not punishment. Elena offered a small, approving smile. Growth through community. Rachel advanced to the final point. Third, action. We launch an annual empathy audit, a secret shopping program where representatives from various backgrounds travel incognito across our network, evaluating service from check-in to disembarkation. Their findings will drive targeted training and process improvements. The room fell silent. Stephen's eyes flicked to Richard, who considered the proposal with a thoughtful nod. Ambitious, Stephen finally said, but essential. James looked at Rachel. This would require significant resources, training budgets, staff time, and audit infrastructure. Rachel acknowledged, yes, but the return on investment is loyalty, brand reputation, and reduced risk of incidents like mine. We'll start with a 6-month pilot in our top 5 hubs and scale up based on results. A beat passed as the executives exchanged glances. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice clear and unwavering. I endorse this plan. Rachel's journey embodies our need for systemic change. Her insight is invaluable. Richard stood. I second the endorsement. Ops team, you have your marching orders. Stephen closed the folder. Then it's decided. Project Compass will launch Q3. Ms. Turner, you will lead the first workshop. Rachel felt a rush of relief and pride. She nodded, voice steady. It would be an honor. Elena reached across the table, placing a gentle hand on Rachel's. You've rebuilt trust through humility and action. Now, you'll rebuild our culture. The executives rose, shaking hand and exchanging quiet congratulations. Rachel stood last, her uniform crisp, her posture transformed from self-doubt to confident purpose. As the meeting adjourned, Elena escorted Rachel to the outer office door. In private, she said softly, remember, leadership isn't a status, it's service. You've proven you can serve with heart. Rachel exhaled, a genuine smile blooming for the first time since the ordeal began. Thank you, Ms. Vargas. I won't let you or Aero Global down. Elena's cane tapped twice. Tap, tap. A heartbeat in the quieter hallway, marking the start of a new chapter. One of collective accountability, empathy-driven action, and a service culture reborn under the guidance of those who understood its true value. And as Rachel stepped into the corridor, the walls seemed to whisper their approval, echoing the promise, Aero Global, always serving with dignity. Sunlight bathed the Aero Global headquarters in a golden glow as Rachel Turner crossed the lobby, her uniform crisp and badge shining with promise. The familiar hum of conversations, executives discussing flight routes, engineers planning maintenance, trainers coordinating workshops, felt different now. It wasn't just another day. It marked the dawn of Project Compass, the company's bold new initiative born from one woman's mistake and another's forgiveness. Rachel paused by the glass atrium overlooking the tarmac. A gleaming Aero Global jet taxied past, its engines purring like a contented giant. Memories of Flight AZ-812 played through her mind. The gate confrontation, the public apology, the cockpit call, and the private conference room where she'd pitched her proposal. Each event had been a pivot point, steering her from arrogance to accountability. Her first task today was a site visit to Terminal 3, where the inaugural bias awareness workshop would unfold. She met Leah Bennett in the staff elevator. The two shared a brief, understanding smile. Leah, now a workshop co-facilitator, carried a stack of prepared materials, scenario cards, feedback forms, and a tablet loaded with real passenger testimonials. "Ready?" Leah asked. Rachel nodded, heart steady. More than ever. They stepped out onto the concourse, passing gate agents and security personnel who greeted them with curious nods. Word of Rachel's new role had spread quickly. Some faces showed respect, others lined with skepticism. But today was about action, not judgment. Inside a conference room near the gate, a diverse group of employees assembled. Gate agents, flight attendants, customer service reps, even a few pilots. Rachel welcomed them with genuine warmth. "Thank you for joining us," she began, voice carrying the authority tempered by humility that Elena had taught her. "Today, we start building a culture where every passenger feels seen and respected." She outlined the agenda. Immersive scenarios to surface unconscious biases, peer-led feedback exercises to foster open dialogue, and real-world stories from passengers who'd been marginalized. Then, in the front row, she saw a familiar face. Sebastian Drake, the businessman who'd witnessed her slip-up and redemption. He gave an encouraging thumbs up. Rachel glanced at Leah, then began the first exercise, a role play where participants switched roles, gate agent to passenger, flight attendant to passenger. Each scenario revealed how a single assumption could fracture trust. When volunteers hesitated to step into roles they'd traditionally judged, Rachel guided them gently. "Notice any discomfort? That's empathy's doorway," she explained. "Lean in." After the role play, small groups formed for feedback circles. Each cohort discussed moments they felt judged or overlooked and brainstormed strategies to change their own responses. Rachel moved among them, listening intently, offering prompts to dig deeper. "What would you feel if this happened to you?" Or, "How could a small gesture alter someone's day?" Later, Rachel unveiled the service charter mock-up, bold lines of text that passengers would receive before boarding. She invited attendees to critique it. Gate agents pointed out language that felt too corporate. Flight attendants suggested adding a line about listening first. Together, they refined the charter, crafting a document that felt both aspirational and authentic. By mid-afternoon, Rachel and Leah led the group through the empathy audit overview. They described how undercover evaluators would travel across AeroGlobal's network, observing service touchpoints. The goal was not to catch errors, but to uncover pockets of excellence and areas needing support. Pilots raised practical questions about logistics. Engineers asked how maintenance staff could be included. Rachel noted every concern, promising to integrate feedback. As the workshop concluded, the room rippled with energy. Participants exchanged ideas for next steps. Gate agents volunteered to co-facilitate future sessions. Attendants offered to mentor new hires using the workshop materials. Even a senior pilot asked to observe and learn. Rachel felt a swell of pride. This wasn't just her redemption. It was a movement taking root. She recalled Elena's words. "Leadership isn't a status, it's service." Today, leadership had been passed from one woman's forgiveness to an entire company's resolve. Back at headquarters, Rachel caught sight of Elena in the executive suite. Their eyes met across the lobby, and Elena offered an approving nod. Rachel returned it, silently acknowledging the journey that had led here. Later that evening, the first empathy audit team boarded flight AZ-314. Among them was an undercover passenger, Liam, a young disability advocate who would assess accessibility and respect for all needs. As Rachel watched them disappear into the lounge, she recognized how far AeroGlobal had come, from exclusion to inclusion, from isolation to community. Walking back through the lobby, Rachel took a moment to look up at the Aero Global emblem etched into the glass ceiling. A stylized compass rose, symbolizing direction and guidance. For years, that emblem had pointed travelers to destinations. Now, it pointed Aero Global itself toward a new horizon, where dignity, respect, and empathy charted the course. And as Rachel stepped out into the crisp evening air, the runway lights twinkled in the distance like stars guiding her forward. The journey of transformation was only beginning, but she knew one thing for certain. With every lesson learned and every heart reached, Aero Global would always serve with dignity, and she would lead the way. What did you think of Rachel Turner's journey from a snap judgment to leading Project Compass? I'd love to know. Have you ever caught yourself making assumptions about someone based on their appearance? How did you handle it afterward? Which moment resonated most with you? The shock of that first-class slap, Rachel's public apology, or her cockpit confrontation? What would you include in our service charter if you were part of the Project Compass team? Are there any specific commitments or phrases you'd add to ensure every passenger feels truly respected? Your experiences and ideas help shape more empathetic service. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation about how simple acts of kindness and awareness can transform not only a single flight, but our daily interactions with everyone around us. If you found this story inspiring, give it a thumbs up and share it with friends who value dignity and respect in every encounter. And don't forget to subscribe for more Karma Telltales, where every twist reminds us that true power lies in humility, forgiveness, and the courage to change. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.